sea of red, it's time for another Fireside Chat, the official podcast of Flames fans. It's go time.
Well, it's been a short but emotional week here in Calgary. I'm Dan alongside Matt. And Matt, why don't we jump right in and talk about the Columbus game?
Yes, a very anticipated game.
Yeah, I mean, when the schedule was made in the summer, I think a game nobody cared about, right? Both these Columbus games, I don't think anyone was all that excited about. And now, with everything that's happened with Johnny Gaudreau, as we talked about last week with our guest from Locked On Blue Jackets, it's become a lot more of a, I guess, it's a game a lot more people are looking forward to. And I have to say here, the Flames did a fantastic job honoring Johnny. I
agree. And it was pretty much a perfect night. Like the reaction from the fans, the spontaneous chants at various points, including like the final minute with the Johnny Hockey chant, and the Flames. Pat Steinberg naming Johnny the first star of the game. I think and having Guy come out on the ice. I think all of that was wonderful and
well orchestrated, and there's a lot of things that weren't part of the game either. The way that the Gaudreau family is treated before that, and showing off some of the legacy pieces, and like the whole weekend leading up to that. I think just a fantastic story that they told to honor Johnny.
I agree.
An emotional game. I mean, I've gone to some emotional games when Jerome retired, when Kipper retired. This is completely different, and I think something that everyone couldn't have anticipated. And when I heard that the intro was just going to be a video, I thought it might have been a little underwhelming, but I think it was exactly what it needed to be.
Yes, they did hit that part out of the park for what it was.
Are you surprised that number 13 isn't in the rafters in some way?
I think, as I mentioned on the previous show, that, if the family didn't necessarily want that now, that would make sense. And, say,
and they probably want the kids to be older.
Yes, exactly. And, in the new building and, which makes a lot of sense.
I mean, Johnny Jr.'s still a baby. Meredith is pregnant with one more. I can see them wanting the kids to be old enough to understand.
The oldest is 2 years old. So, it's not like they're, going to remember any of it. Even if they retire the jersey, it's just a bunch of very young children. It's not.
Who have to stand for a long time.
Yes, and they're not going to remember any part of that, other than seeing photos of them being there. And I think that in a few years, once the Flames are in the new building, and I think then would be a perfect opportunity when they're all 5, 6, 7 years old type of thing.
First time Columbus comes to town in the Scotia Place.
Yeah. Maybe not even then, but, at some point in the future, just basically once the kids are old enough to understand, then.
Yeah, give it 2-3 years for the kids to understand what's going on and why it's impactful and be part of that. And I think as a way for them to honor their father as well. I think they did it just right.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I was kind of surprised about, and we've seen the Blue Jackets wear the number 13 patch all year. I kind of expected the Flames to have some sort of 13 patch on their jerseys for the night. And that's the one thing that I was a little surprised didn't happen.
Yes. And I think that if Gaudreau was still a Flame when this happened, that of course that would have happened. But, he technically was not our player anymore. So I understand the non-inclusion of that, even though it would have made sense.
I can see not wearing it all season, but I would have at least worn it for this game.
Yes, I agree.
So Calgary Flames win this one 3-0 with Dan Vladar in net. It was funny. Guy Gaudreau came to the dressing room afterwards and gave a little speech, and he said, "Wow, you guys almost never score 3 goals in a game." So even he was acknowledging that this was a high-scoring effort for the Flames. Great game for both teams. I was really surprised that Anderson got on the board and Backlund had the game they did. I thought those guys might be a mess, and I think it's great they were able to both get on the score sheet.
Yeah, I thought that Columbus played absolutely terrible throughout the entire contest. like after the first period, like they had 0 scoring chances in my books and were just, going through the motions. Like that might have been the easiest shutout in Vladar's career. And the Flames did want it more. And like you saw how hard they were pushing then when Anderson finally scored, and then in the third getting 2 more. They definitely were more hungry for the win, to win it for Gaudreau. And it was just a good performance by the Flames.
Great Flames game, like you said. Shutout for Dan Vladar, and Kevin Ball gets his first goal as a Calgary Flame as well. I was kind of surprised when I heard that was his first goal. I'm like, he hasn't scored yet. Interesting, because he's been such an impactful defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
So the 3 stars here, as you mentioned, technically it's weird going to the NHL website. They show 2 stars as the 3 stars, but Michael Backlund number 3, Erasmus Anderson number 2, and of course they can't add him because he's probably not on the active player list on the website, Johnny Gaudreau number 1. And it was just great to hear the music again and Beasley call his name again, and I know a lot of people got choked up by that.
Yeah, and I do have to give major props to George Canyon's rendition of Johnny Be Good in the video as well. He did a fantastic job of that back during the Candlelight Vigil, and then subsequently videoing it for the commemorative video.
Anyone who's interested, you can find that video at the Calgary Flames website now.
Yeah, and it's also on YouTube under Go Johnny Go.
There you go. So the Flames come off a good win there. I guess one of the big stories outside of Johnny Gaudreau in this one was the lineup change for the Flames. We finally saw Kuzmenko get benched. Kuzmenko was not playing here. Neither was Justin Kirkland, who's injured. We'll talk more about that injury a little bit later. In their place, we saw Jakob Pelletier slot in and Walker Duehr slot in. So Duehr was playing with Coleman and Zari, and Pelletier on the 4th line with Lomberg and Rooney. What'd you think of those guys?
I did not really notice Pelletier at all in the Columbus game, and I thought Duehr was engaging very much physically and throwing the body around quite liberally in his ice time. He was noticeable because he was actually hitting people, but Pelletier, I did not really, outside of like a shift in the first period, I didn't notice him at all.
Pelletier only played 8:24 in that game. That could be why, where Duehr played 11:04.
Yeah, even then, like if you had said that like Pelletier and Duehr had only played like 5 minutes each, I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that's how little both of them contributed in terms of being noticeable. But obviously they did get the ice time, but they did not really have an impact in this game one way or the other.
Which I also wasn't expecting them to, right? I mean, call-ups playing lower in the lineup. This was not a game I was expecting either guy to see a lot of time in.
True.
So the Flames played that game with their lineup changes, took Wednesday off, and then played again on Thursday. Thursday, the St. Louis Blues are in town. Dan Vladar net again for his 3rd start in a row. We had Dustin Wolf, I guess, under the weather a little bit, so we're starting to see the every other getting broken a little bit there, and the Calgary Flames get 1 point out of this one in a 4-3 overtime loss. Do you want to talk about the overtime goal?
That's one of the things where if they called things consistently, there would be no complaints. And I've seen that goal being both called a goal and waved off. And very same circumstances in other games, other cities, where one time it will count, other times it won't. And if you consistently call that a goal, fine. If you consistently wave it off, fine. Pick one. And the NHL, with so many of their calls and reviews, you literally do not know what you're going to get, game in, game out. And like, especially with all the recent goaltender interference getting waved off, I thought for sure that, because Parayko did push his leg into the net, which caused him not to be able to stop the puck, that would have been waved off. When you look at like the last 3 weeks around the NHL, where like 8 or 9 goaltender interference where the guy barely brushes by the guy, and that play gets waved off. So, like, it's that consistency. Like, I do not care one way or the other that the Flames lost in overtime. Like, they did not play well in the overtime, in my opinion, so they did kind of deserve to lose. But it's just that consistency of, like, what are you going to actually get from a review?
With modern technology, I'm kind of surprised the Flames, or not the Flames, but the NHL War Room can't kind of pull up comparable goals that quickly and say, okay, how do we rule on this same or very similar condition last week? And maybe they are, but it just, like you said, the consistency leads me to believe that they're kind of taking every call one at a time.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, they should have, like, a folder for each review and, like, drag and drop them in, and that way they can just pull up, oh, well, this is how we've called things the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, even with an AI like you could build today, it wouldn't be hard to say, hey, find other goals in this footage that have similar player placements.
Yeah, and it's just tough because, like, most of the Flames fan base was, deservedly upset for that being called a goal. But, like, it also... like, if there had been plenty of other reviews that showed the same play being a goal, then it's like, well, that sucks. Oh, well. But, like, even the wording in the actual rule book is kind of ambiguous as well, because it's like, well, if you push the goalie in, then it doesn't count. But because the puck was loose instead of under his pad, then it technically counts. And it's like, there's just weird framework instead of, like, just clear cut, like, this happens, this is the result. And
and that's something the NHL's been criticized for years.
Yeah, because, like, in Major League Baseball, it's, when they go to the reviews, it's like, okay, did the ball go over the line for a home run or did it not? That kind of thing. And, like, it's very standard, like, if it's you're out or you're safe, and it's very clear cut, and, like, very few complaints about any of the reviews in that league because it's, fairly cut and dry. And because of the fact that, like, we have technology and can actually store videos on things, like, you could easily, make things cut and dry, and the NHL doesn't. And I think that's where the frustration at the league itself, because it's like, you just have to do one extra step and then there's no problem, and they don't ever actually do that one step.
It's fair. Talking about the lineup changes again, Jakob Pelletier gets on the board in this one, gets his first goal of the year for the Flames, obviously. Ryan Lomberg, Daniil Marimanov get the assists on that. Nice to see him coming back in and getting on the board. Like you said, didn't look all that great in the first game. I thought he looked very engaged in this game.
Yes, and I think, like, he was realizing, like, especially after the last game, that, like, I have to actually be noticeable if I want to stay in the NHL. And, like, even, taking the goal out, like, he was still impactful and noticeable on each of the fourth line shifts in a positive way. And
I can give him a bit of a pass for maybe not doing that in his first game. I mean, we hear time and time again from guys called up, it's a different league, right? It's a step up from the AHL. And if you're used to playing the AHL, you probably need that game or two often to ramp up to the NHL level. So I totally don't fault him for, maybe his first game not being that impactful.
True. And I thought Walker Duehr also was noticeably better, even more so than in the first game. He generated a couple of chances as well and was physical throughout the game as well. So I'll have to give him props. Injecting
both guys looking like they deserve a job.
Yeah, injecting some youth into the team has actually helped. And, unsurprisingly, they got 3 out of 4 points. And, removing a player that's been struggling mightily in lieu of the younger players, I think has helped the team as well.
After getting those 3 points of a possible 4, the Flames are now at 31 points, which pushed them first in the Western Conference wildcard, fourth in the Pacific Division with Vancouver above them at 32, LA at 33, and Vegas at 39, Edmonton right below them at 30. So we're still above Edmonton, that's a good thing. Still in that wildcard spot, but I mean, one more win and you're tied for second. As we talked about last week, very, very tight division right now.
Yes.
And Matt, let's jump back to the what you were mentioning before this of taking a guy out. So when we had Kevin Olenek from Shifts and Pucks on the show, he suggested maybe putting Kuzmenko on waivers. That hasn't happened yet. I don't know if it will. We'll talk about why. I'll go through the math on that in a little bit if we want to. But finally sitting in the press box. He's been sitting out. Justin Kirkland is now out for the season, unfortunately. So he's out with an ACL. He had a successful ACL surgery, but he's out for the year. So the Flames
basically the same thing that felled Mantha earlier this year got Kirkland as well, and not expected back until May, June. So definitely not going to play this season.
So the Flames have lost their Costco membership, and they've sat Kuzmenko out, and that leaves room for Duehr and Pelletier. What do you think happens with Kuzmenko at this point?
I think that you kind of give him, once you reinsert him into the lineup, you kind of give him a little bit of a cushion of a few games to see if you're, if there's a pulse there. And if he starts to actually playing better and looking like he actually cares. It's hard when, prior to us having that conversation with Kevin Olenek, I mentioned that he had been looking a little bit better in the 3 or 4 games prior to that conversation. And then since then, he's looked just equally as bad as before that little stretch of actually somewhat decent play. And it's one of those things where if he is not going to contribute in a positive way on the offensive side of things, he is hurting the team because he's not very good defensively. And it might as well just, put him on the sidelines and have literally any other player in the organization play, because you're actually going to upgrade the team.
So right now, if the Flames were to put him on waivers and send him to the Wranglers, they would no longer be cap compliant. He's making just over $5 million. Let me figure out exactly.
We actually only would lose $900,000 off of the cap hit. So the rest of the $5 million, the 4.1 would still count. It would. Okay,
good.
Yeah.
Then they'd be 450 above.
Yes. So
because we're just over $4 million above the cap. So even then, I mean, you're kissing that line there. If one other guy gets hurt, you're gonna need to find some salary to replace it.
Yeah. So we would still be on the hook for $4 million of the $5 million.
That's right. Yeah, I got it flipped in my head. I thought you're right. You only get $1 million off. I thought you only paid $1 million.
Yes. So. Basically, one way or the other, we're stuck with that cap hit throughout the year, whether we assign him to the minors or not. And realistically,
I see no reason to send him to the minors. I mean, just make him your number 13, 14 forward until you move him or the contract runs out at the end of the year.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those where, some team at the trade deadline, if we ate half, might be willing to throw us a 5th round pick just to, hey, we could use a roster spot, an extra depth winger. But yeah, I don't expect any bit of a return for him. And it's disappointing because he was actually so good for us at the end of last year. But whatever the reason, he just, whatever that was, has evaporated. And yeah.
But I mean, even that, we didn't see that for the beginning part of the season when he was with Vancouver, right? I mean, that was why he got traded.
True.
So, at this point, I don't see any reason to send him to the Wranglers. I think you keep, with Costco out, with Kirkland out, there's one roster spot there. With Kuzmenko out, there's another roster spot there. At this point, I think I'd make Kuzmenko earn his way back in the lineup. I think Pelletier and Duehr would be in my lineup until one of them plays their way out. And then you put Kuzmenko in and see what he does.
I agree.
But I'm perfectly I wouldn't just give him a game to see what he's doing. I think you've seen enough of his work and there's enough of an MO there that you know what he is. I think at this point you let him sit in the press box until he needs to come back in, and you just use him as your 13th forward. And like you said, if you can find anyone to take him for anything at the deadline, even if it's a conditional 7th, or a future consideration, you do it. But if you can't, I mean, the deal's over at the end of the year. Just ride the deal out. And, the Flames have the cap room to do so. Like, it's not going to cost them anything really to do it. They'd already budgeted for it. And I honestly, sadly, think this is probably Andrei Kuzmenko's last year in the National Hockey League.
I agree. And it's one of those things, the talent's there, the effort's not. And it's hard when, you have a player that's as talented as he is. Like, he did score 39 goals legitimately. But the effort's just not there. And
sort of like Adam Ruzicka.
Yes.
I mean, he has way more talent than Ruzicka, but Ruzicka's whole thing was kind of, the hot and cold nature. That when he was good, he looked good. When he was bad, he looked bad.
Yes. And it's one of those things that, much like last year, you want guys that actually want to be here and give an effort. And, we ditched a whole bunch of players last year for that very reason. And it's one of those things where, like, if he's not wanting to put the effort in, there are plenty of other younger players that want to take a spot in the NHL. So,
and even if you want that to be a veteran spot, which I can understand as well, you'll find another veteran who could go in there.
Exactly.
Speaking of Ruzicka, putting up better numbers here than I thought. He's playing in Spartak Moscow in the KHL, 26 points in 34 games.
Which in the KHL, that's actually really
dynamite. That's still a pretty competitive league, and he's not the guy I'd expect to be putting up those numbers.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, like maybe in a year or two he makes his way back to the NHL, which is possible. Because
if I look at another former Flame over there, I know this isn't former Flames hour, but Dylan Duehr, who I'd say is a better player than Ruzicka, playing for Dynamo Minsk, 25 games and 9 points.
Yes.
So, yeah, I would say that he's probably the better player of the two, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
With Kirkland, I don't know anyone takes him for anything. Like you said, if you're going to move him at the deadline, you'll take anything. You'll even take future considerations. Like, you're not getting value back for Kirkland.
Kuzmenko.
There's not really a lot of teams not Kirkland. For Kuzmenko. Yeah, you get value for Kirkland. And I think they'll re-sign Kirkland. Like, I think before next season, he'll be back for sure. But Kuzmenko, no one's going to give you value. Like, if someone wants him, no one even has $5 million they would spend on him. So like you said, if the Flames can move him for 2.5, great. Otherwise, I think you just ride him out here as your 13-14 guy.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like, and if worse comes to worse, you could assign him to the Wranglers and just kind of not have them play him. Worse comes to worse, like, you can kind of just, soft end the player on your organization.
You can't send him all the way down to Rapid City.
Yeah. Well, or you could, like, I know they've done this in the past, like, assign them to a team in, Europe as well. Because I think they did that with Ordio, I do believe, at one point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think for either of those, and I could see a scenario where they do waive him and buy him out, but in order to do that, you would need, or he doesn't report or something and gets suspended or something like that because he's going back to Europe, which would seem very Kuzmenko-ish, but I think the Flames would need to take on salary first. And I still think at some point they will take on salary.
Yes.
I mean, it's going to happen. It's not going to happen yet, but I think if Kuzmenko is going to leave this team, some other dominoes have to fall first. You can't just tomorrow send him to the AHL or tomorrow let him go back to Europe. Like, you will need to replace some of that salary somewhere, because even like you said, even if they only have to pay the $4 million, you've got like 300,000 left against your cap. So if one other guy goes down, you're not necessarily going to be able to bring up the best guy from the Wranglers. You're going to bring up the guy who gets you to the floor.
Yes, exactly. And, math complications are never fun. So, and I'm sure that, like we saw with the Trouba trade yesterday, that, there are plenty of teams that could use some wiggle room. So I'm sure that, like, if the Flames actually needed to add salary, like, they could go get, like, Ryan Reeves off of Toronto or something along that lines, like, here's a 30-second conversation, trade's done. type.
Yeah, and I mean, we won't maybe talk rumors this week, but there's a lot of talk of maybe Kadri going to Toronto, and they don't have a lot of money, so I could see Toronto having to send money back, and then you're getting that money back that you could use to make up the difference. Like there's enough teams out there that want to shed some dollars that it wouldn't be hard for the Flames now or close to the deadline to pick up.
Well,
that
and
money.
much like the Lindholm trade, like the Flames definitely, like, say they wanted to trade, say, Anderson or Kadri or whomever, like we could take their variation of Kuzmenko back to equivalent the salaries as well.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing you could do is almost just move two guys who need new scenery, right? Move Kuzmenko for somebody else's $5 million. I mean, very similar to what we saw with the Lindholm deal, where we moved Lindholm, but we had to take a body back, and yeah, there's lots of ways it can happen, but you're going to need to bring a body in to do anything with Kuzmenko.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually some teams right now, according to Puckpedia, who are actually over the salary cap. Especially with injuries and things like that. So there's going to be some teams that will have to shed some cash, and they'll have to get compliant at some point. And I still think Calgary I still think Calgary's we didn't see Calgary as a broker last year. I think Calgary will both broker and take on a salary this year. That's my prediction.
Yeah, and I would not be surprised. Like, especially last year, like the focus was definitely on moving the 5 players that needed to be moved. 6 players, frankly, if you include Markstrom at the draft. The onus on this is to, manage your assets and try to get as many picks and prospects as possible just to carry on with the retool and, hopes that those players turn into more assets for you down the line.
Yeah, and I'm just doing some math here on Puckpedia. Even if the Flames were to absorb a contract, let's say broker a deal for someone at 2.5, then you're well over the floor. You wouldn't have to bring in the body. But yeah, I think they will use this cap this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see, and Kuzmenko, when you put him out there, isn't necessarily a liability. I just don't think he's that good. So even if he's your number 13, he has to play once every 10 games. I think you can get away with that for where the Flames are. Again, as we've talked a lot about, the Calgary Flames are not a Stanley Cup team. If they were, it would be a very different story. But with where the Flames are, I think he's good enough to be your extra forward.
I agree.
But, good for them for sitting him. I mean, there's a lot of times you see veterans not get sat. It's almost like you have a right to play in the league after a while.
Well, and it's encouraging the young players because it becomes a true meritocracy. And like we're seeing on the Wranglers, you've got Cooley playing well. You got Sloviev and Kuznetsov playing extremely well on the blue line. And, 2 of the 3 best forwards in the AHL getting recalled. And like if we had an injury on the blue line, I'm sure one of those 2 defensemen would get called up. And if a goalie got hurt, Cooley would be up. And it's encouraging them, like, okay, you're doing great. Here, you get your chance in the NHL, and that's how it should be.
Not just a chance. Like I think right now you've got 2 guys. Let's say Walker, Duehr, and Jakob Pelletier fighting for one spot in Kirkland's spot, and the other one saying, "You've got Kuzmenko breathing down your back, so we want to give you the spot, but you got to be better than him." It's not just a call up. We're willing to give you that permanent spot.
True.
And I think that there's more competition when it could be forever than just a call-up. I mean, it's like Kirkland. No one thought he'd be here forever. We, probably all thought it'd be a one-game call-up, but he cemented himself there, right? So I think when there's that chance to cement yourself, you have a different motivation.
Exactly. Which that brings the best out of your young players, too, and helps them to actually spur their development forward. Like we've seen Coronado taking a huge step this year, and we've seen Zari continue his excellent play from last year.
Yeah, and too early to tell with Jakob Pelletier. It's only been 2 games, but he's looking a lot better so far than he did last time we saw him on NHL ice.
Yes, like that game.
We see him on NHL ice every game, but yeah, in a Flames jersey.
Well, and the game against St. Louis, like that was better than any of his games last year. Period.
Yeah, and he was still not noticeable. The St. Louis. That's right. Yeah, St. Louis game. I thought you said the Columbus game. Yeah, St. Louis. That was still pretty good.
Yeah. So hopefully he keeps it up.
Yeah, and again, if not, okay, you set him down, you put Kuzmenko back in, right? Like, it gives you options there, or you try Rory Cairns or something like that. But I liked that the Flames, I mean, going into the season, we talked about how they had too many forwards, right? And injuries are starting to solve some of that, but I like that there is a chance for those young guys to take a spot.
I agree.
Matt, a story that's been going around a lot this week, I think Wes Gilbertson wrote about it. I've seen it talked about on social media. A lot of talks being made that the Flames are now 1/3 of the way through the regular season and don't have a single player on pace to put up 50 points or more. And I guess they've never had that happen in a non-abbreviated season. The team scoring leaders never finished with fewer than 54 points. A lot of talk about this. A lot of people kind of surprised. To me, I'm not surprised by this at all. The team is not, let's be honest, not designed to be a good team this year. We all know that, right? This is designed as a rebuilding team.
Yeah, like the only thing surprising about this team is their place in the standings currently. Like everything
and the fact that Huberdeau's looking good.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where like every component of the game, it's like on the stat sheet, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Because like the Flames don't have any scoring forwards at the moment. Like literally the best, goal scorer we have is a rookie in Matt Coronado. Like that's it. Like we don't have any weapons for scoring goals. That's why we've had so many games consecutive with 3 goals or fewer. It's difficult to win games, and that's why the standing surprises me more than anything. But for everything else, no, that's pretty much right on par.
Yeah, and even Coronado is not on pace for, anywhere close to a 50-point guy yet, especially not when playing with Backlund and Sharon Govich. Like, in order to get points in this league, you need someone to move the puck to you. He's not a McDavid who can do it all by himself, and he never will be. And so,
he's the complementary scorer, like a Michael Camilleri, where you need like a guy like Lanko or Ginla firing pucks to you to take the one shot, one-timer slap shot to score the goal.
Yeah. And I mean, when your first line is Huberdeau, Kadri, Pospisil, who's going to be your 50-point guy? Like, I'm not surprised by this at all. If we were, again, supposed to be a Stanley Cup team, it'd be very different. But when people are talking about this, I'm wondering why it's such a surprise to a lot of people. Like, who are you expecting to be that guy?
Yeah, we don't have any offensive talent. Like,
Kadri looked good last year. Sharon Govich looked good last year. But, those guys aren't looking as good this year. But neither one, I don't think, could be expected to be a 50-point guy.
No, and to be honest, up until the Lindholm trade, most of the guys were on pace for a relatively terrible season, and then got boosted by Kuzmenko actually fitting in well with guys like Sharon Govich and Huberdeau and boosting the power play. And you saw everybody's point totals kind of go up from there, and our offense actually, came alive for the first time in the year from that trade forward. And if we had that kind of effort the entire season, we probably would have made the playoffs last year. But if Kuzmenko's not doing what he's doing and Kadri's not playing quite up to snuff and Sharon Govich isn't playing quite up to snuff and Blake Coleman's not playing quite up to snuff, this
are they
is
not
not
up to
surprising.
snuff, or are they just not up to where they were last year? I think last year was a surprise for Coleman. That's not a usual year for him.
No, but even for his
Kadri.
Even for their usual, for all 4 of those players, they're down quite a bit from even their expectations of their averages. So, but again, we don't have any offensive weapons, and it's hard to collect points if nobody can actually shoot the puck in the net. So it kind of is what it is.
It's discussions like this within the Flames community that really make me wonder, do people really understand what's going on here? It's like 1 minute you're having the discussion about, they're rebuilding, we're looking forward to first. And it's like, oh my gosh, nobody's scoring enough points. It's like, we can't have it both ways. You've got to understand where they're at, or you've got to throw it away and say, let's be a playoff team. But you can't kind of say, it's great we're rebuilding. By the way, nobody's putting up points. If technically you're rebuilding, you don't want someone to put up points because then you're going to go higher up the standings, right?
Exactly. And like the fact that the Flames are, I think, 13th in the NHL at this point in the season is kind of a ridiculous joke based off of how the entirety of the team has played. And like, if you look at anybody in our neighborhood, just talent wise, we are by far the worst team of that group. And, for all intents and purposes, like, we should be down with Anaheim, Chicago, and Nashville at the bottom of the standings right now.
Yep.
And
so,
unless things change, which they won't, because we don't have the weapons to do that.
Nor do we want to spend what it's going to take to get those weapons.
Yes, like you can't.
Nor should we.
No, and like there's no reason on the fly. Like the Flames need like 9 players to actually be a good team. Like you can't do that in one season. Like
no.
Yeah, and and like it's not like, oh, we need a third line center or something. No, we need like a first and second line, which we don't have. And, like basically all of our guys are third liners or below. That's what we've got. It's tough.
Well, that's it. I mean, when you look at this roster, let's be honest. Kadri, his best days are probably behind him.
Yes.
Huberdeau, his best days are behind him. When they're on a first line with Martin Pospisil, who we love here, but if you look around the NHL, is not, a top flight player.
He's a fourth liner on a good team. Like, he is Lomberg, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we like Sharangovich here. He's okay.
Yeah.
Backlund is a steady number 3. Coronado's upcoming. Like, we've got I'd say of those first 6 guys, Coronado's the first one I've said, yeah, he's got some room to grow.
Yes.
I think Sharangovich, we know what we've got there. And then your third line is Coleman, Zari, Duehr. It's like, who? Right? Like, again, we like Zari and Duehr. I think Coleman is great. Zari is known in this market. I bet if we were to have asked Jay last week, do you know who Connor Zari is? He'd have no idea.
Yeah.
And then your last line is Pelletier, Rooney, and Lomberg. Remember that Rooney spent part of his time here in the American League, right? Like, Pelletier is just a call-up. Like, you're right. This is not a good team, and it's not designed to be a good team. And I think people need to remember that. Like, they're overperforming, great, but they're not designed to be good.
No. And realistically, like there is no scenario where this team is good enough to make the playoffs as is. And like the amount that you would have to shed, like you'd basically have to empty the entire prospect pool and all the draft picks for like the next 5 years just to get enough players to temporarily be okay enough to make the playoffs. And like,
if the Flames happen to fall into a playoff spot, great, do it, run with it, get these guys some playoff experience, but understand every game you get to play past the first 4 is, your own earning.
Yeah.
Get in there, play your 4, have some fun, get some experience, and move on.
Yeah.
You're guaranteed 4 games if you can get in.
Yeah, but realistically, there's no way that that's going to happen.
And, talking about how this team is not a very good team, I think that also speaks to the fact that only one Flame has been named to the Four Nations face-off. Rasmus Andersson named to Team Sweden. Apparently, according to Frank Saravelli, Mackenzie Weegar, the last cut for Team Canada. Again, doesn't surprise me at all that only one Flame is named. How about you?
Yep, and that's the only guy that I think deserves to make it. If injuries happen, like Weegar and Wolf, I think would be also candidates. Beyond that, there's not a single player.
No, that's what. Yeah, I mean Weegar, like I said, I think was the last cut.
Maybe Backlund.
Yeah.
Again, like if Sweden runs into like a center injury issue,
if they run out of vets.
Yeah, like you could throw him on the fourth line center, and that would be fine.
Yeah, Mackenzie Weegar coming in last cut doesn't surprise me. Anderson making the team doesn't surprise me. But again, it's like, who are you going to put on the team here? Are you at all excited for this?
Absolutely not. Do not care.
You and I talk every year about the All-Star game. I have no interest in this. I really don't care. I'll care when the Olympics come back. This is a fabricated tournament I still believe is not best on best without including Russia. I understand they don't want to team Russia, but put them on Team World. I mean, you don't even get Draisaitl in there because he's from Germany. Like, have some way to have a collection of other guys.
Yeah, like it just feels very chintzy and not well done. Like
somebody actually suggested on Mastodon this week, which is sort of a Twitter alternative for those that aren't sure. They said it would almost be cool to have a team of guys that didn't make it for their country, almost the unwanted, who were playing against everybody else. So yeah, we should have been on this team.
Yeah, or like that World Cup thing that they did where they had the under-23 team plus, like a world team.
Yeah.
Expanded to 6 teams, and, you could still do the same tournament, just have 6 teams instead of 4, and, make it easy instead of...
Yeah, I think the world team should be there for sure, because there's still guys that are excluded.
Well, it's like a guy like Andrei Kuzmenko. He's the only player from Slovenia, period. Like, they only had 130 people when they drafted him who actually were registered to play hockey in the whole country. So like, he's never going to be on a national team. So when this thing was announced,
he and Draisaitl were the only guys that were able to book vacations because they knew they weren't making it.
Yeah.
Everyone else has to wait and see if they make the team. Even a guy like Uyghur could still get pulled. A guy like Draisaitl was like, well, I'm going to Mexico. See you guys later.
Yeah, and I know. And especially with it taking like 2+ weeks out of the NHL schedule in February, like... it's hard, like, especially basically, like, you have, like, the first half of the season prior to that, then, like, the trade deadline's, like, immediately after that. It just doesn't feel like a well-thought-out thing in its entirety.
No, and, like, you were talking about a rookie team or an under-23 team. I think that would be great. I think even if you were to get... I know you probably couldn't get it, but even if you had an AHL All-Star team playing this, like field an AHL team against the NHL guys would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, it just feels like the All-Star game with more teams. And you and I have talked for years about how neither of us have been all that excited about the All-Star game.
I know, and it's like, instead of it being like a 5-day thing, let's make it 2.5 weeks. Yay.
Yeah, like the Flames' last game is the 8th of February, and then they pick up again on the 23rd. So they have exactly 2 weeks off.
And it's like, who cares?
Again, I'm excited for the Olympics, especially knowing the NHL will be back.
And the
that
World
I'm excited
Juniors,
for.
yes. Like every year, that's a fun tournament. Except for Team Canada this year with their weirdness. But, it's tough because like this is just so fake and manufactured that it just doesn't even feel like it can be in the like not even in the conversation as like that World Cup thing from a few years ago where like even that felt hokey, but at least like that was in the preseason and not interrupting the season.
And I guess to me it's like this is being done a year before the Olympics, and I think because of that, it just feels like a poor man's version of the Olympics. Like, do something different. Either have maybe different countries or play, if you want to do like the All-Star format, play conference versus conference for 2 weeks in a round robin. Or like it just feels like with the Olympics next year, if the Olympics were 4 years away, I might feel different. But with the Olympics in 2026, this just feels like almost the Chinese knockoff of the Olympics.
Yes, and it just feels poorly thought out.
And if they could have done something with the IHF, like the team that wins here, I'm just making something up, automatically gets a bye through the first round of the Olympics or something, then there'd be something to play for, right?
Yeah, or like preferential seeding type of thing. Like they get to choose their opponents in their division or something. You know what I mean? Like something along those lines where, make it a little like you have to pick, from each of these sections, so that way you're not like just taking like the 3 deadbeat teams.
Yeah. Well, I mean the host is Italy, so you would probably want to play the host because they're not going to get far, but the host wouldn't want to play you.
Yes, but something along those lines. But it's not the case, and like there's just no part of it that feels like authentic in any way, shape, or form. And like I know myself, like I'm going to be taking a 2-week break from watching hockey for because I literally do not care and have better things to do with my time.
Well, and the downside to this, I think, is even with the All-Star break, the guys that are in the All-Star game still get a break. Like they still get some time off. In this, you really don't. And I think it's going to lead to some more injuries because of it, because you're not getting your star players that break that they need.
Exactly.
And nobody gets their bye week. It's not like you get your bye week before or after that. Nobody's getting their bye week.
Yeah. I know. It's just very poorly thought out.
And, if this wasn't so league sanctioned, I bet you would have had a lot of guys who said they're not coming, like the All-Star game. But I have a feeling they were told they had to come.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense.
And it does make me wonder what the competition level is going to be. Is it going to be All-Star level? Is it not?
I have a feeling that it'll start out All-Star level, and, as the games go on, they'll probably get a little bit more intense, but again, not, even like an NHL game level competitiveness.
Like, I'm just thinking to myself, if I was an NHL player who'd grown up wanting to represent Team Canada, is it in a fake manufactured NHL tournament like this? Like, do I care about this? Does this feel like you're representing Canada? As an outsider, to me, it doesn't.
Like, if I was selected to one of those teams, would I go and participate? Yes. Would my level of caring about the outcome of the tournament be as high if it was, say, the Olympics or the World Championship? No. And, it'd be kind of you respond to the game as it is, and if you win, you win. You don't, you don't. Of it's hard because there's literally no bonus for you winning or anything. It's just, oh, we won the manufactured tournament where not every good player played. Yay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'm just trying to think of things they could do that'd be interesting. And, I know that there's the Champions League in Europe where a lot of the best European teams play their best teams against each other. Doing something like that would be interesting to me. Like, take your Stanley Cup champions and for a week play them against, the best KHL team, the best SHL team. That I'd probably watch.
Yes.
Have a tournament of real best on best, not by country, but by league. And I don't know, this.
Yeah, like in the early or the late 80s or early 90s, they literally had the USSR play against the NHL teams, and everybody played against them at some point, and it was kind of a neat exhibition where everybody got to play against the Russian national team, and that was a neat thing back then. And there's nothing like that now. And just add to your point,
as much as I'm happy for Raz, I guess I just don't care.
Yes.
So maybe Matt and I are jaded. If you're listening to this and you're excited for the Four Nations face-off, let us know. Let us know on social media. Come to the website and leave a comment, firesidechat.ca. You can find all our social media links there as well. Or if you agree with us, let us know too. Let us know if we're just cranky old men like those two guys on the balcony in the Muppets, or if we're sharing the sentiment of Flames fans. I'm curious. I know we've got some flack in the past for not appreciating the All-Star game. I'm curious what fans think about this game, and send us an email, whatever you want to do, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I think that there's probably a bigger group of people than we think that feel like us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think it has to do with our team being bad. Even if our team was good, and we had half our roster going, I still wouldn't care.
Yeah, even if we had 7 or 8 guys there, I'd be like, okay, cool. Hopefully none of you guys get hurt.
Yeah, when it was first. Even when it was first announced and we had no idea who was going to be on the roster, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that seems Olympic-ish. Why don't we just wait for the Olympics?
Yeah.
And I bet if you pulled the players, they'd probably just rather take the 2 weeks off or the week off.
I agree.
So, but you and I aren't commissioner yet, Matt.
Yep.
One day, they'll have to replace Bettman with both of us to get the job done.
Yes.
So
our weekly predictions,
ahead,
one has a good idea, the other has a bad idea. We bounce off of each other.
That's right. That's right. Together, we'll get things sorted out. One of us might put in a dumb rule, the other one will put in a not so dumb rule, and together there'll be an okay rule.
Exactly.
But talking about the weekly predictions, I got the right number of points last week, but I did things wrong. I thought that we would win St. Louis, lose Columbus, and it was win Columbus, lose St. Louis, even though they got a point. And you thought we'd lose both, so neither of us won last week. It's 2-1 Matt at this point. We've got 4 games in the docket this week, 2 home, 2 road. On Sunday, the Flames go to Dallas, take on the Stars, a 6 p.m. start time. Tuesday, they're in Nashville, taking on the Predators, another 6 p.m. start time. Then they're back here on Thursday the 12th to take on the Tampa Bay Lightning at 7 p.m. And then a Saturday night game, Hockey Night in Canada, our usual 8 p.m. start against Florida. What are you thinking? It's a tough week to predict.
I'm gonna be mean. 0-4.
Really?
Yeah, they don't do well in Nashville for whatever reason. They struggle against Dallas, they struggle against Tampa, and they struggle against Florida. So, how about we just 0-4 it and, hope to be proved wrong.
They've got points in their last 7 home games. They won 6 in a row and then got the one against the Blues. You don't think that they're going to be able to keep that streak going?
No. I fully expect the Florida teams to mop the floor with the Flames.
Dallas is a good team. I think they're going to struggle with Dallas because Dallas is, whether it's home or the road, Dallas plays a very different style than the Flames. I think they're going to have a hard time with it with their weak defense. I'm not sure about the Nashville one.
Neither am I.
They don't do well in Nashville.
Nashville's the easiest game for them to win, but they have just the last couple of years, not ever since that overtime goal by Tkachuk in the last second, like they've not really performed well in Nashville, and they tend to find ways to lose, whether Nashville's playing well or not. So that's why I'm leaning.
And Nashville's style this year seems like something Calgary shouldn't have a ton of issue with.
Yes. And they're the second worst team in the NHL currently. So.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Nashville, of all the games, should be the kind of the free wins of the week.
Yeah.
I pretty much given them. Okay. So I'll tell you where I'm at. I have a loss on the end. So I have a loss Dallas, loss to Florida. I'm not sure what to do with the middle two.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this week's a sandwich. They have 2 losses on the ends and 2 wins in the middle. So they're gonna lose to Dallas, win Nashville, win against the Lightning, and lose to Florida Panthers. I think that they will get a win against one good team because we know they can. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
this is probably the week I've been the most unsure of yet.
Yes, and same here. And like I was kind of waffling on the same 2 that you selected for wins, but I figured, well, let's go for 4 because be mean about it.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough. Like they should not be beating good teams, but they are, right? And if we look at where Calgary is on paper, as we've talked about, versus what Calgary is.
Yeah, like we're at least 10 points or 10 spots in the standings higher than we should be at best, if not 15.
Yeah, and I mean, Calgary's looking good, but other teams are also looking bad, and it's been a perfect storm of things going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if they got 8 points in the table this week, I think 4 points is a good week. I think 2 points is an expected week.
Yes, and 0 points would not be surprising.
Not be surprising, but also disappointing.
Yes.
Like if you can't, especially with a team like Nashville on the table, you should be able to squeak out 2 points.
I agree.
And then, yeah, I mean, really, if you look at it, these are not the only hard games for the month, as we talked about last week. They've got a couple other competitive teams coming up, Vancouver, Vegas. So, if you want to stay where you are, you're going to need to get some points.
Mm-hmm.
But really, this week and next week, by say the 21st, by Christmas time, let's say 21st, their last game, I think Calgary could slip back to where they should be.
Yes. Well, and especially like if you look at the standings, like there were only like 6 or 7 points up on the bottom 5. It's despite being in the top half of the standings, like they are not very far from falling all the way down the standings. So.
No, they're not.
And if they have another couple weeks like the last 2, like it will not take them very long to go all the way down.
No, they have 7 games between now and Christmas, 14 points in the table. 14 is a lot of points. And we're starting to see other teams that are picking it up, like Edmonton starting to pick it up. And yeah, I think between now and Christmas could be the make or break time for them. With good teams coming up and a lot of games coming up, and then a lot of home games too, because they're on the road a lot in January. We haven't talked about January's schedule yet, but they're on the road a lot. And then as we talked about, February really gets broken in 2 pieces in terms of games before and games after. So yeah, I think these next 2 weeks, with the quality of opponents they're seeing, both good and bad, it'll show you what these guys have got.
Yes.
And especially with the rookies, being in the lineup, Duehr and Pelletier, we're going to get a good look at how good they look here.
For sure. And you just have to hope for the best.
And I have a feeling on Saturday, Tkachuk is going to light these guys up.
Yes. Same here.
Like, I don't know. I have it in my mind when I look at that one that we probably get, 3-4 points from Tkachuk.
Yeah. Well, we should still celebrate him because, hey, he prevented Edmonton from winning a cup, so we'll always be a Flame, even if he's on another team.
There you go. Forever a Flame, just like Johnny.
Yep.
I would love to see him in the Raptors one day. Matthew Tkachuk, guy who stopped Oilers from winning cup.
Yep.
That's the whole reason we're putting him up there. No one at the ceremony, nobody talks about his time in Calgary. They all talk about his time in Florida.
Yes.
Being
yes, during that one series, that's all we talk about.
And he also played here for a few years.
Yes.
So, yeah. No, I think I have a feeling that Florida game is going to be a tough one for them. If Wolf is healthy, you think they go back to every other?
Yeah. I think that just whatever illness he has, no need to, it's like if Vladar was sick, you'd just play Wolf until...
Do you think that you give Wolf 3 in a row to make up, or you just go back to every other?
I think it's just in every other, and, bounce back and forth until, something happens one way or another.
Well, Matt, we got a busy week coming up and could be a very sad week for Flames fans, but you and I will talk next weekend, and we will see how the Flames make it out of this week.
Yep. And as always, go Flames, go.
Fireside Chat is hosted by Dan Stevenson, co-hosted by Matt DeBorg. This episode produced and edited by Peter Marino. Fireside Chat is licensed under Creative Commons license. For full license details, visit firesidechat.ca.